dear friends and YouTubers, and welcome to this review of the Logitech flight yoke system, which is essentially a flight yoke and throttle all included for the price in 2020, and whether it's still worth buying in 2020. Let me first start by saying something that's very prominent and very important for this video. I've seen these when it was released way back. I think it was when Cytec were producing these way back in about 2006. Always wanted one. These were very, very popular when they were first released, and I didn't buy one. But because I play things like Flight Simulator X quite a lot, and I'm using light aircraft, which have, let's just move that view down. You can see the yoke in the aircraft itself. It has a yoke similar to this. I've always wanted one. But I was always kind of using a hands-on throttle and stick system like the Holtas 4. I'll link you to my original review of this. It's okay, it does the job. It's great for games like Elite Dangerous and for DCS World, so combat flight simulators. That does the job well. When it comes to Flight Simulator X, X-Plane, Prepared 3D, or whatever you're flying, when you're flying light aircraft or the airliners like the 737 or 777, you really want to get hold of a yoke system. And I'm glad to say this does the trick. Let me unpause this flight simulator. It really immerses you in the flight simulation, in a sort of aviation aircraft like the Cessna I'm flying here, the A2A Cessna in the Innsbruck area. Fantastic scenery package, by the way. Really go and get this. Really recommended if you're still flying Flight Simulator X, that is. Anyway, it really immerses you when you're flying light aircraft or aviation aircraft. Really, really feels like a whole different simulation. And I've been playing Flight Simulator X a whole lot more recently. I got this as a present for myself in the Christmas just gone. So Christmas 2019, and I'm so glad I did. It's my first yoke, really important to state that. Never used the yoke before that, either in simulation or real aircraft. Never touched one or never used one before that. So as a first yoke, I'm really in love with this unit, really, really enjoy it. Now, when I bought this, I saw a couple of YouTube videos after I bought it, a couple of extra YouTube videos, and they were complaining that the pitch, so when you pull back on the system to climb, let's show you that, some pause that, so you pull back to climb, oops, climbed a bit too much there, or you push forward to dive, there were complaints that the actual, this sort of mechanism on this yoke was too stiff. I don't know whether or not Logitech have redefined the flight yoke system, but this is now very, very limber. In fact, on the shaft there, I'm not going to touch it now, but there's a lot of grease on there, a lot of grease. But it's very limber. I'm just using one finger and one thumb. You can see how easy it is to pitch on this. Very limber, very flexible. As is the turning left and right as well, of course. It does what it's meant to do. Very, very limber, very flexible, and that just adds more to the immersion. Now, one thing I will state, I want to be very candid with this review. Actually, I'm passing over my runway there, so I won't land now, but when you're coming into land, there's a bit of a dead zone. Let's move the camera down again so you can see the yoke in the game. When you move, actually, let's just center that so I don't crash into the ground. When you move left and right, let's just get it all centered. So I'm flying over this part, and I can always fly back to land if I want to later. When you're moving left and right, now I'll move that slightly left. You can see nothing's happening in the simulation. Let's just pitch up a bit. I'm using some trim so I'm climbing rather than diving, so I don't crash into the ground. Nothing happens in a simulation when I move slightly left or right. You've got to move it a little bit more to get past the dead zone area. Dead zone on a joystick or yoke system like this means that when you're moving left or right slightly like that, nothing's happening until you move it a little bit more left or right. It's not a problem when you're actually turning the aircraft in the air like this. Actually, and when you're pitching up and down, not a problem at all. You just go past that dead zone slightly and it pitches fine. So if you just want to climb, for example, absolutely no problem. Just go past that dead zone. You want to move left, no problem. When you're coming into land, it's a problem, and many people will tell you this who own this system. When you're coming into land, you've got it all lined up nicely. I'm pitching down again there. Just move my throttle up a bit more so I climb a bit more. And trim the aircraft up. I don't want to crash into the ground. I thought I had this nicely trimmed out, but I've been moving it around a lot. Doesn't really matter. When you're coming into land, and you just want to flare slightly, so you're coming into the runway, coming down to the runway, let's just use this as an example, and you just want to move up slightly. Because of that dead zone, you're pulling back on the actual yoke system, nothing's happening. You've got to pull back a bit more. If you're not careful, you end up going skywards, and it can end up on a messy landing. You do get used to it. You can compensate for it and expect that dead zone when you're landing. So line yourself up nicely and just know that you're going to have to pull back a little bit more than expected to flare a little bit or to rise a little bit. You do get used to it, but it is an issue with this. Now let's just pause that. There is a fix for this. If you Google on YouTube, for example, the Logitech Flight Yoke System pitch fix or yoke fix or whatever. Basically, on the underside of this, so you take this off your desk, flip it over, there's about 4 or 5 screws, unscrew the system, looks fairly easy to do, remove a couple of parts which look quite easy to do as well, and believe it or not, you can use something like elastic bands and zip ties, or springs and zip ties, and it fixes that issue. You can get rid of that dead zone area and make this even more flexible to use. I'm not going to do that. I've only just bought this. I don't find it that much of an issue to be worried about, to be honest. You do have to compensate on landing, but only a little bit, and once you get used to it, it's actually okay. Like I say, if this is the way that the yoke system works going forward for Logitech, this is really limber, really easy to pitch. There is a bit of resistance when you're pitching, not too much, just as much as you would expect, but it's just really, really easy to pitch in this and turn. I'm in love with this. My first yoke system. Something to keep in mind. If flight simming is the only thing you do day in, day out, you spent a lot of money on simulators and software and scenery packages and aircraft packages, and you want the best of the best. Obviously, nowadays, there's a plethora of flight yokes out there. The Honeycomb Alpha has recently released. It's roughly double the price of this. I got this for £117. The Honeycomb Alpha is about £200 to £250. Looks like a better yoke system to use. Texture sort of grips and goodness knows what. But it doesn't come with a throttle quadrant, so you have to factor that into the price as well. This system, for £117, when you buy this, comes with the yoke and throttle quadrant. A lot of people rate this throttle quadrant. I find it okay, it's usable. Looks a bit like a toy to me, but it does the job. You've got the sort of thrust there. You can use that as the mixture and flaps if you want to. I don't know. You can use these for different things. You can buy a module that goes over all 3 of that. If you're using airliners like 737 or 777, then you can use a sort of module that goes over a lot of them. It's just like one big switch and use it as a big thrust system. I'll be looking to buy that myself. For the price, for your first yoke system coming from a simple HOTAS system, if you're like me, you've only used simple HOTAS or HOTAS systems to fly aviation aircraft, you're going to find this a joy to use. Typically, I use my D-line clip unit. Interestingly enough, on camera, you can see the actual infrared lights there. I can't see them in real life looking at it, but you can on a camera. That interacts with a camera on top of your monitor or TV, and when you turn your head left or right, you look left or right, basically, just naturally. Using that and this together in a simple flight simulator like Flight Simulator X or X-Plane or Prepare 3D. It's massively immersive, so much more immersive than just using that and the hat switch. Even if you're just using the hat switch and using this is so much more immersive than using a halter system. I want to imply that massively, express that massively. It's a huge jump from just using a simple joystick or halter system. A huge jump. If all units like this are as flexible as this, go for it. For £117, if you don't want to spend too much, absolutely worth it as your first flight yoke system. If you want something more professional, you can buy flight yoke systems like the Brunner flight yoke system for £1,000 plus. £1,000, yeah, for a flight yoke system. Believe it or not, I'm tempted by that £1,000 flight yoke system because it has a lot of massive force feedback and resistance in there, really sort of metals construction. The best of the best. Yeah, when I can afford it, I'll probably go for something like that, maybe one day myself. But as your first flight yoke system, absolutely recommend this. Absolutely. And because it comes with a flight yoke and throttle out of the box, really, really good. Easy to attach to the desk. No screwing needed for this. There's a big sort of big screw clamp, not a screw, it's like a clamp that you just clamp it to your desk here. It's just so easy to construct or put on a desk. Same for the throttle system, and it just feels, every time I look at it, I just want to use it and play it. So I've only had it for a week or so now, but I just want to constantly use it, and it just feels like I've got this flight control system in front of me. In fact, I do, always. It's just lovely. I'm just really enjoying it. So full recommendation. Comes with a lot of different buttons and functions. Interestingly enough, when I just plugged this device into my computer, into my USB slot on my computer, Windows 10 automatically found the drivers for me. I started Flight Simulator X. In the control system, I ensured that the flight yoke system was the one selected. A lot of these buttons are already assigned, so the hat switch is obviously already assigned. This is assigned as a pitch trim. If you're flying the aircraft and you find it's slightly moving up or down. Oops, I've got my throttle set to 0 there. So it's going down now because I had my throttle nulled or down to 0. You can see it's slightly going down there. I use this trim here to move the aircraft, nose of the aircraft up. And it just puts you basically in level flight. Now I've trimmed too far up, so I'll have to trim down a bit. But anyway, that's the thing, so I'm just trimming down there to get it more in level flight. That's the idea of it. But it automatically assigns that in Flight Simulator X when you just plug this into your computer, basically. This is automatically assigned as flaps. You can mess around with this. You've got various different buttons, and even buttons down here you can assign, and various things here on the throttle quadrant you can assign for different functions of the aircraft. There's a sort of rocker switch on the back of this. It's difficult to show you, so I won't. On the back of this handle, though, where my finger is, there's a rocker switch, and it goes through the different modes of the assignment. So if you want different buttons assigned for different aircraft, you don't want that as your flaps on a different aircraft, you want that as your pitch trim on your 737 or whatever, assign that to mode 1. When I'm flying a Cessna, I'll put it back to mode 3, and that's now my flaps instead of my pitch trim, and that's my pitch trim. So you can assign it. It means you have a lot of different combinations and possibility of assignments on the actual units, which is great for the price. Again, even in 2020, you've got a clock here, which is the actual current time it is in my part of the world. It takes it from your computer, so it's 18:24 and 22 seconds. If I press this button, it's a stopwatch. Now, talking to a friend who flies Cessnas in real life, he said that they used to use this function. It used to be on some kind of Cessnas, or it used to be a little clock somewhere, where you can time your turns. So if you want to do that in flight simulation, you can. And you can stop that and reset it and put it back to the actual computer time. I'm going to leave it there, guys. recommendation for your first yoke. Just be aware of that dead zone area, and there is a fix for that. I'll probably do that myself someday. But once you get used to it, it's not so much of an issue. Recommended? Leave your comments below. Do you have one? Are you thinking of getting one? What do you think of the system if you have one? What do you think of the look of it? So goodness knows what. I'll be interested to know. What kind of flight yoke system are you using? That's more interesting. That's as much interested to me as the actual as this is. Anyway, let's leave it there before I muddle my words. That's my review, and let me know your thoughts. I'll see you next time.